Hello, and welcome back to NextDev FM, a show for developers by developers. My name is Dan Guzman. I'm joined by my co-host and a friend,
Ryan Vogel.
and today we have a very special guest, the legend himself, founder of an open source project turned profitable business, introducing David Cramer.
Right. Should clarify. Not quite open source anymore, and definitely not profitable right now, but close enough on those things. So we'll call it a rounding error.
Sure, call it a rounding error. Awesome. Well, let's get started. David, why don't you tell us a 2-minute snapshot of who you are and how you ended up where you are today?
Yeah, I started Sentry a long time ago. Software engineer by trade. I ended up here by sheer brute force. I don't know. Sentry worked as a business, I guess. These days I do a lot of stuff, but I am still like very technical. I'm on the builder side, but at work, if you will, I do an assortment of strategic things, which generally means I'm like a glorified like admin at the company, or I'm in management, if you will. But yeah, I don't know. Still very active in the tech scene, particularly in like the founder scene and whatnot. But yeah.
Very cool. It will soon be like 2 decades since Sentry was created, right? And I'm super curious to hear, how did it all get started? Did you hit a bug and you felt like, you needed to build something to address the issue?
I was thinking about, I had this like to do. I had like a 4-hour drive today, stuck in traffic, and I wanted to write this blog post. And hopefully I can swear on here, but it's called fucking Scott. Cause there was this guy, pretend his name wasn't Scott, but it was definitely Scott, that I worked with. And they are the definition of why Sentry needs to exist, because they were like an SRE and they would not give you access to the servers, and stuff was broken. You needed access to logs to like figure out what's going on. And they're like, no, you can't get logs, and Sentry already existed at this point, to be clear, but it wasn't as important to me. And then I experienced that kind of thing in my career. And I'm like, okay, this is why these kinds of tools need to exist. And this is why you need to take control away from people like that. But generally speaking, it's just like, it'd be really nice to know why the application is broken. And we could just stick those things into a dashboard. And then one thing led to another. And it's like, oh, we could also send ourselves an email when something's broken. Oh, we can collect more information when something's broken. And it's just kind of has evolved from there. But it was definitely built out of maybe not a need originally, but out of like an interest in sort of improving upon that problem. And then over time, nowadays, I would say Sentry is like an absolute need. Like if I spin up a project and Sentry isn't on it or doesn't work, which seems to happen regularly for me. I think it's because I use new tech all the time. And I'm like, oh, my stuff's like broken all the time and I have no idea. And I'm like, oh yeah, this is why Sentry is successful.
I'm the problem. I'm the reason why it's so successful. Well, in both ways.
We always say people used to be confused. It's like, Sentry's good because Sentry captures errors, if you will, and then you may fix them. Probably you'll fix some of them. And everybody will be like, well, if you're really good, if like Sentry's really good, people just have less errors, and then you'll like put yourself out of a job. I'm like, that's not how it works. Nobody's going to have less errors. There are just more errors all the time, no matter what. You're not going to fix them all. You don't care. You have other stuff to do.
Especially
it's
with
like forever
AI
in business.
Yeah.
I'm like, and like we're working on tech that will like help you fix, especially the trivial ones, which you would fix anyways. It's just like there's a lot of them sometimes, and they're just trivial and maybe they don't matter that much. But it'd be nice if they didn't exist, is how I put it. But yeah, it's not like we're gonna have fewer bugs in software. We're just gonna have a lot more software, a lot more things to address with it. So
Right. And for some of the viewers who may not be familiar with Sentry, can you give like a quick 1 minute like elevator pitch of like what it is? We kind of touched on it a little bit, but yeah.
Yeah. I think the TLDR is. I always explain it. Here's how I'd explain it to like my grandmother, assuming she knew what Uber was, like the Uber app. I'm like, you open Uber, it crashes. Sentry tells the software team about that crash and everything that happened, so they can fix it. They may or may not fix it, unclear, right? That's what we do, but we do it for more than crashes. So crashes, errors, if you will, are the big thing. But if it's fast or slow, we can do that too. We can tell you why it's slow using distributed tracing. If it just doesn't load at all for some reason, we can also tell you that it doesn't load at all. Like, signups went to 0 yesterday. Technically, Sentry can do that, even though it sounds like analytics. And so generally speaking, it's just like the idea is like you break code, you ship a new change to your product, something's broken in it. We're going to tell you about it, give you the right information to fix it and whatnot. And we particularly do that extremely well in web software Though these days, like Sentry is actually pretty universal. Like we're actually doing game console support right now, like Xbox and PlayStation, which is an entirely different world, mind you. We also work on like mobile apps and everything else. So
do you do any, this is just a personal question. Do you do any sort of like enterprise, like heavy duty, like PCI, like the outdoor like reporting stuff? Because I mean, you have a great reporting platform. Do you do any sort of like physical infrastructure reporting?
not that I'm aware of realistically. So if you think about like embedded like hardware and stuff like this, like technically I think our tech actually works. So a lot of that's like C or something equivalent to C.
Right,
And
yeah.
we take those formats totally fine. It's just like a weird different ecosystem. We have this running joke where John Deere is not a customer of Sentry, and we don't actually care, but I care for some irrational reason. I'm like, why isn't John Deere a customer? And it's only because in San Francisco, there's a John Deere Labs office. I have no idea what they do. And I'm like, salespeople, can't you just go knock on their door? Isn't that how sales works? And like get them as a customer?
Right.
And so now it's forever a meme. I'm like, why is John Deere not using Sentry? They have software somewhere in the tractors, in the systems that run the track. I don't know. Like there's a lot of software in there somewhere. But one thing I will say is like the embedded world is like your fridge and random stuff like this. It's just like different. Like I don't know.
I wasn't
People
even
address
thinking
it
like
differently.
fridge. I was thinking like for like more PLC systems, like infrastructure. Because my previous job, I did a lot of IT work on like these Siemens systems where you had like these massive embedded microcontrollers. And after I played with Sentry about a week ago when I was exploring it for some project, and looking at like the way the log traces and stuff like that get registered versus like how I saw them with like the Siemens PLC stuff, I was like, wait, it infers the air source? Like I don't have to go take this random memory ID and then cross-reference that on the other microcontroller. I was like, whoa, that's super cool. So I was like,
Yeah.
for like
I think some of it. So I'm not an expert in a lot of this stuff. It looks more like, I'm going to just call it all like firmware looking, because all like usually lower level systems, it's like abstracted in a different way. It should all work, but like we found stuff like just you've got a GPU in a lot of things, right? And GPU and anything that's like compiled at a system level usually has it's just you don't have the source code, right? And so you can't actually point to a line of code, which is the useful thing that Sentry does. And so what we do is we have this technology, which we didn't invent it. It's but it's called like mini dumps, which is like this way to you have the symbols over here somewhere, and symbols you can think about like if your JavaScript is source maps, but it's like kind of the raw source code, but not quite. But you have symbols, and we're able to take this through this format and make it look like code that you might understand. And the problem is you don't always have those symbols. So we actually work with a lot of vendors now to get them. So like, for example, an unnamed video GPU provider is like, hey, could we give Sentry our symbols, like our official symbols, but in like a way where not everybody's going to have access to them because maybe there's some secrets in there, but in a way that would help your customers that rely on our like SDKs and stuff. I'm like, that'd be pretty cool, you know? And so I think there's just a lot of these kinds of problems. And again, this doesn't exist in the web. Like if you use like JavaScript's its own mess of problems with like Ruby or Python or PHP, like those kind of just work. You don't think about these problems, but then you get into like compiled code and everything else, and it's just like a completely different
mess. Thing. Yeah. No, yeah. So, obviously, you know a decent bit about like the infrastructure and stuff like that to be able to actually apply this. Where did your origins begin with infrastructure? Did you have like just like a really nice home server, or did you work at a company that sort of taught you the basics of that?
I am pretty much all like self-taught. And so I was really I still like video games, but I was really into video games as a kid, as some of us were. And at some point I figured out that you could build software around games. And so I think I forget what it was, but there was like a Final Fantasy Online game or something of this era, but like a long time, like I'm about to turn 40. So this is like 20 some years ago, give or take. And I'm like, oh, it'd be fun to build a database around this online game of like where all the items are and stuff like this. And that was just building like a CRUD app, right? And I'm like, this is kind of fun. And then that graduated to like World of Warcraft stuff when I realized I could data mine files and like reverse engineer their data formats. And then you could just like automatically have the database instead of manually entering all this stuff. And so that kind of trend just continued throughout my career. And I think one thing that always fascinated me was like big like technology problems, in the sense of like, I'm not an academic whatsoever. I can probably solve a lot of problems and not explain the academics of it. So it's not that I'm completely incompetent, but I could not tell you how to implement basically any algorithm that ever existed. I might know what it is, but I won't know by name or something. Right, and so I spent a lot of time, doing these kinds of things in my career. And, I worked at some sort of consumer scale startups. And frankly, a lot of the stuff is just gluing SQL databases together and learning how to optimize system access. It's not easy, but it's not hard either. Like the barrier to entry to learn is pretty low. It's just we're like less exposed to it these days because like everything's abstracted through like cloud services and stuff. But like, I mean, I've never actually like racked servers or anything at that level, for example. But we have had like, I forget if we had co-located servers, but we've at least had like managed infrastructure, which might as well look like EC2. It's kind of the same thing.
Right.
Any of these AWS services. And then you just learn how to configure those systems and you learn how to like, oh, I need more memory because I'm out of memory. And like little things like this, you just build on it. And so it's all just like, I'd say argue trial and error, but I feel like my upcoming was a different version of the internet where a lot of the technology problems were not yet solved. And so like, It's not like scaling a SQL database is not really a concern most people have to deal with these days, where back when I was starting, most people had to deal with that concern. Like you had to learn some of these skills. Now it's like, well, you still need to learn like indexes and how those work, but really that's about it. You don't have to go much deeper than that because hardware is pretty affordable and there's a lot of systems that you can just use that scale up for you. And so, but yeah, I think a lot of stuff is really approachable in tech. Though it's also gotten more complicated in recent history too. So I don't know, but yeah, all self-taught.
Yeah. So it's really, really interesting. Like a lot of where you come from, it sounds like stems from you having passions and hobbies and then you looking to double down on them. Curious to hear, what was your first ever programming project that you got into?
I think the first thing I tried to make, as many people do, is a blog or something like this. And I vividly remember this. I had like a jokes link at the top of the header. And I think I Googled some jokes to put on there, something like this. And I'm like, I don't even, like, why did I have this page on my personal website or whatever? But I don't remember. Because like the first tech I built was all around kind of two things. It was either game stuff, like I said, like with the World of Warcraft and all this, or it was like, so I got my start programming. Like I did PHP right away, but there was this thing called MIRC, which IRC is a internet relay protocol, chat protocol, something like, I forget what it means, but it's like an open source chat protocol thing. It doesn't really exist much these days, but think Discord if a company did not run it, and it was still just as confusing to use, I guess. And it's where everybody was. It was darknet, as they say these days, which was not a term back then. IRC is the dark web. I guess that's what it is. IRC is the dark web. It's where you get wares, download all the music, probably a lot of bad things happening. All the script kiddies or the hackers were on there. A bunch of video game people were on there. Anyways, MIRC was a Windows client that had a scripting language in it. And you could respond to messages and like triggers and things like that. And that's kind of where I learned or gained interest, I guess, in programming and stuff. Because it's not really programming. It's like this weird thing. And I built a lot of stuff around that. And then I built like a website to, again, I think I just like building these like almost like CRUD database systems. And so I just built a website that's like, you can get all these MIRC scripts here. And it's like a bunch of like, it's like I guess we don't really have these today, but it'd be like a GitHub, except it's not really about source code and contributing to source code. It's like, I just want a bunch of stuff. I want free software. Right. It's like an index of free software. Like a directory.
Right? Yeah, it's like a directory.
Yeah. But it doesn't, it's like an app store, but it's weird. Like we don't have things like this anymore. It's like, yeah, you have it on mobile devices and stuff, but it's not like there's a place you go on the internet and be like, oh, I wonder what cool Next.js widgets I can download. It's like once in a while there's a random site, but it's not a common thing anymore. But that used to be really common. So that's what I learned a lot through just like, oh, I can get a counter for my website. I can download it and install it and maybe learn a little bit how it works and whatnot. But it's also one of the big reasons I'm a fan of like open source software. It's just that access and that ability for everybody to learn and whatnot.
That's awesome. Would it be accurate to assume that you made the website on PHP?
Almost early days it was all PHP all the time, which is, I think still today, it's got to be one of the best beginner languages. It's so like easy, low boilerplate, things make sense.
It's simple to understand. Yeah, it's like if you load a page and it's got like some server-side processing stuff required, it's on that page and you're not having to pull from other files or libs. And it's like if this page, like if I go to like /dashboard and it fails, it's most likely, unless you're getting into some crazy stuff, the error is going to be on the dashboard.php page.
Yeah.
And you don't have to look a ton, because that was my first that was my first web language that I did it in. And it was really interesting because my 3D printing company, I would have it so when you upload a file within like the the quote page where it would display like the 3D file price, it would go through the entire slicing project or process in like the server action of the PHP page. So it would take like 1.5 minutes to like load the page, and I didn't know how to like implement like a loading thing. And this is like 7 years ago when I was like 13, and it was just loading, and I was like, well, I guess the user could just like wait 1.5 minutes for the page to load, and I didn't know about timeouts. But it was a great starter language, I'll tell you that, because I learned that that was not a good idea, and that users have a very, very, very short attention span. So,
yeah. I think it's also nice because it was more forgiving. Like, it's actually quite hard to build a new application these days. Like, if we're honest with ourselves, like there is so much complexity. Like, take JavaScript. Whew, good luck. Good luck teaching somebody about every little thing you need to know to deploy a TypeScript app, let alone like a Next.js TypeScript app. It's so many abstractions that are like implicit and invisible, and then you got the build system. It's just not, it's not a great place to be in for technology, in my opinion. PHP is like the sweet spot.
Webpack error, yeah.
Yeah, and like I do a lot of TypeScript these days, and it's a good language, but it's complex. And for a long time, I did Python. Like Sentry is still in Python, and I loved Python as a language, particularly in Django, because it made it accessible, and all of a sudden you had a reason to use Python because it was web now. It's gotten more complicated these days too. Like they've added a type system, and it's like I don't know. Like I'm not a fan of the way some of programming has gone, because there's a time and a place for everything. There's a time and a place for simplicity, and there's a time and a place for complexity, usually related to performance, right? Like it's fine that Rust is complicated. You know, it's better than fine that PHP is not complicated. You know, and so yeah, I don't know. It's changed a lot, but I think it's still a great language.
Yeah, I think PHP is fairly underrated nowadays. Like, I don't know if you're following the work the Laravel folks are doing.
Yeah.
I think it is incredible. It is an incredible place to start. Like, all batteries included, everything you might want in a project. You like, it's all there. Just go and use it. It's awesome.
Oh, another good part about PHP is like the auth and the session are just like all.
You don't have to build anything.
Right. Yeah. That was such a big jump when I went from PHP to like my first like create React app thing, because I was trying to do that on the back end with like Node.js. I was like, all right, so what's the session environment variable? Wait, I have to store this in it. There's no stateful what?
Yep.
Yeah.
It's not like again, there's a time and a place for everything, but broadly speaking, I think there's generalisms that are true. So you build there are no frameworks in JavaScript for the most part these days. They are not frameworks. They don't include anything. There are front ends. There are rendering, basically template engines. I would argue Next.js is a template engine. It's a rendering layer. Every front end thing is a rendering layer. They are not frameworks. There are no database adapters. There's no auth baked into any of these things. There's no session management. There are none of the things you need for a web framework to actually function. And then like some other things have just not kept up. And I think this is one area Laravel does really, really well. And I'm a big fan of Taylor. Like Taylor is like, I feel like him and I are similar people. We both really like tech. We like building things. I'm in a different sort of stage of my journey, but he's sort of now like building Laravel into a much bigger company and stuff. And so it's kind of interesting, but like, it's the one framework. It's like, yeah, JavaScript is important. We do want that like rich front end experience, which is really, really important, versus Rails was like a holdout. Django, I don't know what they're doing anymore. And it actually is batteries included. It has what you need to build a business. Yet here we are trying to reinvent all that stuff. Even there's a quote. So I love this podcast, Acquire.fm. I don't know if you've heard it. They're like 4-hour-long episodes. Amazing if you haven't. But besides the point, they always push this quote from Bezos, which is like, do all the things that, it's like something like only do the things that make your beer taste good. Some idea of like, don't do things that are irrelevant to your business. And I'm like, you know what's irrelevant in my business? Building auth. You know what's also irrelevant in my business? Paying a cloud service to just have auth, for auth to even exist. Neither of those things need to be true. They weren't true 20 years ago. They don't need to be true today, but like those are the options basically. It's like, I can roll something like Clerk and then pay money forever, or I can DIY it because the libraries are not quite plug and play. It's a bunch of like stitch stuff together. And I just don't like this state of technology. It's not great.
Yeah, it feels like you have to do everything yourself, even though it's being advertised where you have to do nothing. Like the setups for some basic boilerplate apps. Like, I don't know, like you'll see like all these SaaS like ship faster and all these other boilerplates that are advertised to be like, oh, it's super simple.
Yeah.
I bought Ship Faster a while ago because I was going to do a video on it. And I looked inside of it expecting it to be like a very minimal Next.js app with just a bunch of components. It is so complex that it's like, I would hate to be like a beginner into code and looking at this massive repo and being like, magic links? What is this authentication? What's the bearer? Why is it expired? I'm like, it feels so overwhelming to like a junior dev, and I would hate to enter with this. And I feel like that's a bad thing too, because they look at it, it's not simple, and they're going to be like, okay, well, let me just use AI to understand it. And they're going to miss out on that initial understanding of actually how the repo works, why we need these certain things that I've and everyone else in this call has sort of gotten, because we haven't had AI available. And we've actually had to get into the nitty gritty and actually understand it.
Yeah. I think the other problem is the concept that you don't have to know, like a magic link or how auth works. That's totally fine. I think that's desirable, right? But the concept that it's a template, like a skeleton, a boilerplate that you still have to maintain no matter what, that's not okay, because you can't maintain it without knowing what it is. And it's not like these things can update themselves, because it is all just custom code at the end of the day. That's like enterprise software. That is like SAP level software, like stuff that nobody should be messing with. It's like a yesterday problem. But like somehow now we're back to this where everything's a custom like software stack and whatnot. I don't know. Something's got to change. I'm just waiting for somebody to really build a genuine sort of application that solves this. I just don't know what it looks like, because some people have tried. It hasn't stuck. Like I think Redwood was a little bit like this. It was a little bit trying to be more full stack, and just nobody cared. I mean, maybe it's just like they didn't like the patterns. That was me. I'm like, this is not my thing. But I really like Tansac's approach. But again, it's the rendering layer. So we'll see. But I do think there's a lot of work to be done there, and it's painful right now. I actually have no idea how you'd get started if you got started in JavaScript. And this is why I think they don't teach JavaScript. I think this is why every program that introduces you to code is still like, we're doing Python. And I think it's still mostly Python, but I think PHP would be a totally fine thing to do as well, or Laravel even, totally fine to expose people to.
I agree.
Yeah. So I'm in college right now, and I want to give this relevant example. I'm in college right now, and the programming classes that I had to take was C, heavy Java, and then a very small Python class. And it's just interesting. Anyways, go ahead.
Yeah. I was going to say Redwood is probably the closest in the JavaScript ecosystem that we got into all batteries included type of tech stack. I don't think there's anything else that comes even close. But anyway, I wanted to close out this segment. We kind of derailed ourselves talking about how tech got complicated. We engineers love to invent new problems as we are, looking to perfect our systems. I want to go back to the beginning of Sentry. And I'm really, really curious to hear at what point, I understand this was a hobby project in the beginning, right? And at some point you decided that it's going to become a company. When was that point, and what made you pivot?
Yeah, there's I think the main thing is you'll spin up a side product and you're like, how can I not lose money on this? And maybe one day I'll make money. You have ambitions about bootstrapping it, lifestyle businesses and stuff. And I think that was it. I'd done this a bunch. You usually stick ads on something, right? And it doesn't pay you any money. It's a waste of time. And so this was this was just open source. It wasn't cloud service or anything, right? I had a lot of open source stuff I worked on. And somebody from Heroku approached me. They wanted me to make Sentry work as an add-on for Heroku. They were a PM for the add-ons thing on Heroku. And I'm like, oh, that'd be cool. Maybe I'll make some beer money. Again, same ambitions. I'm like, oh, a little free money kind of thing. I didn't realize you had to build a cloud service to offer it as an add-on. And so it was a quick reality check that they were not just going to magically host a thing and I just collect a paycheck and it's really easy. And so over Christmas, and this is 2012, long time ago. Over Christmas, I built the cloud service, which was I just added billing code to the whole thing, subscription management to the open source thing. And then Stripe was up and coming at the time, and it was actually faster to integrate Stripe than it was Heroku. And so I launched it without it even existing on Heroku, even though that was kind of the goal. And then some people paid, and that was cool. And I ran that for, I think it was almost 3 years, something like that, where it was just this little hobby project that was making a little bit of money here and there. I was not charging much, but I would use it to basically sponsor conferences, which mostly was Python conferences I was already going to. Maybe I'd host a karaoke happy hour or something like this on Sentry's dime. And so it was kind of a nice way to subsidize some of those activities that were already going on. And then eventually in 2015, we had a couple thousand customers. I'm like, oh, people raise venture. That's how they build businesses. I'm just going to go raise VC money and now make it a real job kind of thing was where my head was at. And so TLDR, we did that. And then that's not quite how venture works. Venture is like, I'm going to be insanely ambitious no matter what and reach for the moon. And that's why you raise venture. And so I'm like, that seems fine too, And fast forward, that was sorry.
Yeah, before you raised with VCs, you were bootstrapped for a couple years, right?
Mm-hmm.
What did your clients, while you were like bootstrapped, did you have any sort of like promises like in the future we might be VC backed or something like that, to kind of basically be like, hey, we're not actually going to disappear one day because we run out of money? Or did you just say, trust me, bro, we got this?
Nobody ever asked. I don't think I don't know if they cared or not. It was kind of interesting because we had a lot of individuals, and there's a lot of SMBs in the world, and they don't care. Like JP Morgan, they care. A random startup down the street literally could care less about any problems like this. They're like, whatever. They don't even this is not registering on their mind, right? Like they'll switch to somebody the next day if that's what it takes. Like they'll do the work. And so nobody really cared. We did have a few real customers. Like HubSpot was like our biggest customer at the time. And I specifically recall them because we had like 2 day-long outages. And the first one, they were like furious. And I'm like, I'm the only guy. I don't know what to tell you. Like, and then the second one, they were fine with it. But yeah, so I think it was okay. And it was mostly because the expectations were low because we didn't have enterprise customers, if you will. We weren't charging a lot of money. And so like from 2012 to 2015, basically like 2015, January, I go full-time on Sentry. Somewhere in that first quarter is when we were like raising money. And so these numbers are like fuzzy, but like we had about 2,000 paying customers, like paying logos. And we had like 600K in revenue. We were profitable, but like not by like huge margins. And I was not paying myself. Like I had just left Dropbox. And I was not matching my salary. I was like taking a small pay cut and stuff. And I was paying my co-founder who does product design. And I think we were paying one other person then. And that was basically all of our money beyond like the server bills and whatnot. And we were cutting so many corners in the sense of like when you bootstrap something, especially if you're trying to do what we did is like, I want everybody to use my things, thus it needs to be cheap. It's quite expensive. And so we had some like really jank dedicated server host. That was like the cheapest thing of all time. And we had 2 of them only to make sure the database did not live on the same server as everything else. But it was, in all honesty, like if I look back, I'm like, that's a little scary. It's a little scary what could happen in those situations. And then we got some other deals and we were basically able to subsidize the cost. And so Sentry, like for like literally from day one of bootstrapping until, I don't know, shortly after our Series A, we were effectively profitable. And we're not profitable now, but it's because like we have a lot of money in the bank. That's not the goal. But it's like we were able to like kind of scrape by over and over through a lot of ways. And it wasn't using AWS, to be clear. AWS would have been really expensive back in the day. Still is these days, to be honest with you. But a lot of these like kind of shortcuts, if you will, and it works. Like it works to get things off the ground. It's like do things the hard way. What you do to 0 to 1 is not really what you do after. So,
yeah. Do you think so? After you got VC backed, do you think that like that sort of relieved most of the bottlenecks that you were kind of having with like growth? Because like right now, Sentry has like over 4 million devs, 130,000 orgs. That growth, I mean, from what you're describing, has been pretty massive. Do you think that growth just exponentially grew after you were VC backed, or were there any other bottlenecks like after that sort of presented themselves?
No, I think there's always challenge. It's like every month there's like a new thing, and we didn't even need venture. Would we be here where we are today without venture? Probably not. That first year we didn't need it whatsoever. Like we just needed to focus on the business and do some things. Venture gave us breathing room, so we weren't like operating basically like borderline running out of money every day of the week, which was nice for sure. It let us hire a little bit faster than we would have otherwise, maybe pay slightly better, though I still made everybody take a pay cut. Honestly, like the main thing when I raised venture, I'm like, there were competitors. I'm like, nobody gets to win this unless it's us. And the other people had venture funding. I'm like, and we were bigger. We had the better product. We had better engineering talent. Like we had way more customers. We had the open source angle going for us. So the distribution was like way larger. We had like the biggest logos in tech at the time using Sentry, self-hosted and whatnot, open source. But other people had 5 more headcount than us. They had already raised like a Series A and stuff. And I'm like, damn, like we're going to lose at some point. Or rather, I don't have conviction we will not win without more sort of a war chest, if you will. And so we raised kind of on that very different market. We raised like $2 million or something, like tiny seed round for like where we were. And even our A was pretty small relative to what people look at these days. And then we just kind of grew pretty constant over time. It was never exponential. It was like literally just for a long period of time, it was like we double the number of paid customers every year, and that was it. We couldn't manipulate it. It was all just bottoms up self-serve, which is a good and a bad problem to have. It's phenomenal from a strategic value of the company and from an efficiency of the business. It's bad because you can't go sell a bunch of contracts to like prop up your valuation or grow faster than you would otherwise. But again, like that's 10 years ago when we raised. And so it's like today the stats are, I think it's 70,000 paid customers from 2000, 10 years ago. We don't disclose numbers, but we're north of 100 million in revenue, like 350 people in the company. So it's definitely a lot bigger, but we're also not one of those like hyperscalers either. It's like, it's just been like consistent kind of incremental growth, do the right things. And that's still today. We're just trying to do a lot more things now today.
Yeah. I'm noticing a few parallels, very interesting parallels in like the technology we've been describing, how things are getting complicated nowadays. With PHP, all batteries included, you can ship fast, a lot of things figured out for you. And you were bootstrapping your business for a significant amount of time, for years. There's this guy by the name Peter Levels, you probably heard of him online, who is known for advocating against traditional startup funding models. He's all about, you can bootstrap yourself into success. You can, focus on running a lean operation, direct to consumer type of approach. What are your thoughts on that? Do you feel like it's possible to build a successful business with that model, or you have to raise at some point?
I think it depends on your goals. I like the guy's a hustler. What's he built? Bunch of gimmicks. In all honesty, this is my genuine opinion. He's not built a real business. He's not built a lasting business. He's operating like he's 20 years old, which is, again, I think the guy is phenomenal. He's a great hustler, but he hasn't built a business. He's built a bunch of projects that he's made money on. A lot of them are just like kind of memes, if you're honest with yourself. That's fine. It's totally fine, but it's not the same thing, right? Let alone he's not built a business that could ever become a public company. He's not built a business at scale. And that's okay if that's not your goal. Good luck doing that kind of thing without venture capital these days. You're just going to get your butt kicked by everybody else in the space. And that's just the reality. Again, it's totally fine. But I think this conversation of like, oh, you don't need venture, and DHH too. DHH does it for marketing. These guys, they are very smart. They're good at what they do. It's fucking marketing. It is not real life. I think it's great that people bootstrap. I think it's great that people venture. There's different reasons for different things. If you can bootstrap and be successful, you should do it. That is like, you are an outlier, and that's phenomenal. Most people are not going to ever be able to do that. It gets harder and harder. Like tech is not a small scene anymore. Look at what Google, look at the AI space. Infinite venture dollars going into every startup. Google just constantly shipping whatever everybody else's startups are. How are you going to compete with that even when you have venture dollars? You're never even going to compete with it bootstrapped, and so I think it's complicated. There's a lot of nuance to it. If you want to build an SMB that one day you're probably not going to exist because, it's like a lot of these businesses are ephemeral. You can do that bootstrapping really easily, make some money. But if you're honest with yourselves, a lot of the people selling this like bootstrapping vision are also selling tutorials on how to bootstrap your company. It's like the YouTube thing, right? It's like, go buy my course as I teach you how to do this thing that I even like. It'll be like, let me teach you how to get rich, but you have to buy my course. And by the way, the course is just going to tell you to sell a course because that's the only way I know how to get rich.
Right.
It's like a fucking Ponzi scheme,
It's
Again, I think it's
Yeah, there was a one Amazon listing like a couple years ago, and it was like how I made $2,400 off of my book, and the book cost was like $2,400. It's just like
to sell one.
And I think the big difference is because like Levels, he's very successful, and he makes a lot of money, but there's a difference between making a lot of money and running a successful business. Because I could be selling little cards like this for $30 a chunk and making hundreds of tens of thousands of dollars a month. But that's not a sustainable business if I'm having to just every single day just print each one and peel it and everything like that. So there's definitely a disconnect where you can be successful, but it's not necessarily like a business standpoint that you would kind of be going through, which I think is important. So speaking about business though, and having those hats of being the primary like CEO and all that other stuff, you've taken a couple of jumps of position because you went, if I recall, CEO, CTO, CPO. Why?
I don't know. Change of pace. So, I mean, I was de facto CEO because I opted into everything. My co-founder might have been willing to do it. I don't know, but he had 2 kids already. Like, I still don't have kids. And despite what everybody would like to believe, this shit takes a lot of time and effort and sacrifice. No matter how idealistic anybody is the reality, right? And so I was CEO for a long time. I hated the job. I hate hiring executives. I hate dealing with them. I hate investors. I hate sales. I don't really care about the financial like balance sheets. As long as there's money in the bank and it's growing, I'm good. And so like kind of the core
product focused. Yeah.
I'm very product focused. And the core tenets of what a CEO does at a later stage company, not an early stage, there is no such thing as a CEO at a 10-person company, generally speaking, right? Like the job is very different as the company evolves. And so early on, who cares? That's not a real job anyways. I'm a founder. It gets later and the job is more managing all these other things. And it wasn't fun. Honestly, I've hired so many marketing executives and had to fire so many marketing executives. It kind of broke me a little bit, let alone non-marketing executives and other problems. And you don't get rid of this as the founder. So even hiring a CEO, I still have to eat a lot of shit is how I would describe it. But at the end of the day, the buck stops with you. And so like, yeah, the CEO is in charge. He has to deal with all that. I still have to deal with all that because like I am like, and my co-founder does to some degree as well. It's like, we have to do the work no matter what. Nobody should pity us. Founder shares are worth lots and lots of money. And so hypothetically, I'm a high net worth individual. So we get no pity, but that's what the job is. And at some point, we got big enough, we were successful enough that I could hire a CEO, like an actual CEO. And I'm like, oh, this would be great if I could get somebody that would like own sort of the go-to-market side, deal with all this shit I don't want to deal with, frankly. And so I did that. And I'm like, cool, I'll be CTO. And I had a VP of engine, I had a VP of product, and eventually similar things. I'm like constantly struggling. I'm like, how should product function? How should engine function? I don't want to manage a bunch of people, generally speaking. I want to build stuff. I want to focus on strategy, vision, all these things. And so I'm like, you know what? I don't need to be CTO. I don't actually care. Like I have power. I don't need a title to have power. And so I went out and I'm like, I'm going to hire, in fact, what I was going to do is I'm like, I could hire a CPO, give them the engineering, product, and design work. I'll keep CTO and I'll just have my little team and we'll do whatever kind of thing. And then I interviewed this guy who ended up hiring and he's like, how do you feel about me taking the CTO title? I'm like, I don't care. That's fine. If you'll take the job, if that's what you want, done. And so I just took the CPO title. I don't actually have, like PMs report to engineering. They don't report to me. I'm not a PM. I do think I know a lot about product, but it's mostly because I have good taste, in my opinion, and a lot of domain experience. But the CPO thing that's just a made up thing. CTO is like more like, I'll do this job at a time. I run the technology and product thing, and I'm still heavily involved in the strategy of all those things. But yeah, all of engineering, product, and design all report to our CTO now, and I have a small team. So Syntax, our podcast, reports to me. I've got a couple engineers that work on random stuff. And I've got a guy that does like open source thought leadership. And that's my organization now. We call it, I'm going to choose a new title probably at some point, but it's like special projects, if you will, is how we think about it. So
special ops.
Yeah. We had a team at Dropbox called Black Ops. And all they did was like culture stuff. And I always thought it was so fun. They would run all hands. They would make sure like cool stuff was happening in the company. They'd go make cool like swag and merch and stuff for employees. And I'm like, that's a cool idea.
Yeah, it sounds awesome. Actually, a lot of fun. So going back to the idea that the title doesn't matter, I've been hearing this consensus a lot in the past, and it keeps coming back to me. Like, what does a job title really mean, right? You're just creating value to contribute to success of the business. And in that capacity, what is your function at Century right now, creating value for the business?
I would say I am the guardrails in a lot of cases. I force it to stay on track. What I will tell you, founders versus executives, is we've got some great people at the company. I am very different than somebody you will ever be able to hire. I have no fear of anything. I will say what's on my mind. I will do what I think is genuinely best for the company, no matter what. There are no politics. There is no bureaucracy. Doesn't matter reporting structure. Doesn't matter anything. Technically, I report to the CEO. I will still tell the CEO if I think he's wrong. I will not sugarcoat it. I'll be like, this is wrong. You know, I think that's actually really, really important. And that's hard to do if you're not me, like one of the founders of the company, right? It's really hard to do. So I think that's really important. But beyond that, like generally speaking, my job is similar to a lot of executives at the company. It's like strategic alignment, basically make sure we are doing the right things, make sure we are making the right bets, make sure things stay on track. And then beyond that, there's like this sort of founder specific kind of stuff I do, which a lot of that time these days is like, tactically, here's what I'm doing right now. I built our MCP server. Like literally I built that. I am pushing a bunch of AI initiatives, but I'm not the only person. There are other teams also working on this at Sentry. I have a couple of engineers hacking on random things, AI sort of focused stuff. I'm pushing syntax. I'm like, how do we get like celebrity guests on this thing kind of thing, which is a random thing.
Like us, right? Like us.
Totally. And I will actually say a lot of what I do is like marketing now in like a generic sense, right? Like I do a lot of like thought leadery type stuff, which mostly I'm just like out there interacting with founders and doing other stuff. And so like one program I'm running right now or I'm kicking off is like, we are going to go after like sort of the startup cohort in a more focused way in the sense of like, I already invest in a bunch of companies and I'm like, I go to demo day now for YC and I'm like, you know what? All of those people should be Sentry customers. Why aren't they? And I'm going to make that like, that's a KPI now we're going to track, which a lot of companies do this. It's not a new idea, but I'm like, I'm going to own that for now. I'm going to own sort of like, I want more founders using Sentry. I want to know why they're not. And I'm just going to own the outcomes of that happening kind of thing. And so how you define, what is that? Like, where does that live in an org? It's actually kind of random depending on the thing. But generally speaking, my role looks more like a traditional CTO in the sense of CTOs have like random, it's different in every company. I'll give you this analogy. The Vercel CTO, Malta, like I think he has one report, but it's similar to me where he is like, he'll interact with customers a lot. He'll maybe ship some stuff and sort of drive strategy and whatnot. So it adds an immense amount of value to the organization, but not from a people management perspective. And you need that too, so.
Yeah, and I think it's like been especially more so recently, like it's expected like founders and those higher ups would be expected to be like interacting on Twitter and stuff like that directly with the company. And I mean, that in and of itself is like a marketing type thing because you're having to do a sort of public facing thing, but then still also be selling your product in a way that doesn't seem like you're just like, use Sentry.
Yeah. And it's like a high value thing. And it's, again, you can't hire people that kind of behave that way, generally speaking, because they're usually entrepreneurs. They're going to go start their own thing. Once in a while you do, but usually you acquire them, which is been our strategy. So
you got to get them early on before they get like that real inspiration thing.
Yep.
So
I would love to talk more about that, your approach to M&A, right? And how you look at acquisition. For example, just recently, like a few weeks ago, Sentry acquired Emerge Tools. And I'm really, really curious to hear like the rationale behind that and why this decision was made.
Yeah, so we, especially these days, we have a lot of money in the bank, and like you have to, if you have assets, which is usually capital, you must use it. It doesn't add any value not using it. And this is like rule number one when you raise venture. You don't raise money to let it sit in a bank, no matter what. Otherwise, you fucked up and you raised too much money or something. We probably fucked up and raised too much money, but we have a lot of money. So, and it also helps that we make money and don't spend a lot, which is why. And so we look at M&A quite a lot. And this is the same thing I tell founders when I'm talking to them, because I'm pretty direct about the conversation. I'm like, first and foremost, we look for great people. We usually look for small teams too. It's usually like sub 10 people, so earlier stage. But people is first and foremost, and it's always like the founders. It's usually 2 founders. And that is most of the evaluation. That's not enough, unfortunately. Like we look a little beyond that, but like that has to be good for us. Like the founders have to be strong and good. And generally what we're looking for is like, could one or both of the founders be effectively like senior leaders at the company in a few years? Can they own large things? Because again, there's a type of personality and this like confidence, like borderline ego that is like unbelievably useful to just like break down barriers and just like move through things, right? And you get that from these things. So we look for that. Then we usually look generally in the dev tools space because we're kind of looking for people who have some domain experience. And it's great if the business also, or the product or whatever they've worked on also has some relevance essentially that we could integrate it. And then the sort of the third thing, and this is like literally priority order. The third thing is like, well, does that thing they've built that maybe we can integrate also make money? Because that would also be great. I would tell you the latter is uncommon, or at least in any scalable way. Usually what these look like is great team, some good technology or great technology that we can integrate, a business that probably doesn't quite match up to Sentry's, just because Sentry's is such a specialized approach to enterprise software. It's like, it's very large scale, it's affordable pricing, it's not enterprise in the traditional sense, you know? And so usually the business just doesn't adapt. But Emerge is similar, like the 2 founders are phenomenal. They built a ton of cool stuff, primarily in the mobile space, which is important to us. A lot of good tech. We're actually going to integrate a lot of the software. If we're going to charge exactly how they charge or whatnot, who knows? But there is a path to make money on it, of course. But that's like the nice to have for us, in all honesty. But it's like we're really looking for great people, strategic value. I heard this quote earlier today, and this is how I think about it. The worst thing you can do is make a strategic decision based on financials. And the analogy, or what this came from was, I think I'm getting this right, but it doesn't matter. Intel made an offer to Apple to power all the iPhone chips at some point, and they lowballed them on the offer. So Apple passed and TSMC got the deal. That was a really bad decision by Intel. It doesn't matter if the dollars didn't make sense at the time. Strategically, it was the wrong decision. And so the dollars never make sense in an acquisition. They're always way too expensive compared to hiring somebody. But strategically, the people could be like massive outliers in terms of impact they have at the company. And so we've only made 4 acquisitions for what it's worth. So I don't consider myself an expert. And one of those is Syntax, which is a completely different wacky thing. But 2 of them look similar. Emerge in this company from almost 4 years ago called Specto. And the CEO founder of that actually runs a lot of our like sort of tracing and performance monitoring investments at Sentry now. And that's like the dream for me, is like a really sharp person who wants to grow into one of these senior leader roles, can kind of deal with a little bit of the bigger company bureaucracy or shut it down, one of the two. But that's how we think about it.
Really cool. That there's a lot of ways to look at acquisitions, right? You could be buying companies for IP, you could be buying companies for teams, and you seem to be leaning towards acquiring company for the people.
Yep.
How do you manage like how do you vibe check like the culture when you're going in to actually acquire a company? Like you send out like a questionnaire, be like, does everyone think I'm cool? And then like don't acquire anybody who says no.
It's hard. Like honestly, it's the same as interviewing somebody. The problem is you can't interview all the employees. You kind of can, but it's like it's complex. Like if you're like, hey, yeah, we want to do the acquisition. We love the founders. We want to interview every employee. It's like, okay, now it's all of a sudden a really complicated endeavor. It's like, how are you going to reason about that? Are you going to decline the acquisition if you don't like some of the employees? Are you going to evaluate them well? So it gets a little tricky there. That depends. We mostly focus on the founders. Are they really good? Can we trust their decision-making? And you treat it like you would hire somebody. Where I'm looking for like, are they smart? Are they ambitious? Are they kind of authentic? Can they have like a straightforward conversation? Do they have like wacky opinions? That is actually like a big tell for me if they like think the world works in some messed up way that I don't agree with. Cause it's like, I'm okay. It's fine if I'm wrong, but I don't want to argue about like my opinion every day. So it's like, we can both be wrong together, or I can be wrong, but we can't work together. Like kind of thing, if that makes sense. Cause it's like, it is a working relationship, but again, it's like, you're sort of trusting the founders. And if you like click really well with them, that's probably enough signal. Like Josh from Emerge, very similar personality to me, not the same, but like we can just be direct with each other and there's not a concern. And I'm like, I like you, Josh. Like that was my first conversation with him. And I'm like, this is great. And then I eventually met his other founder. I'm like, your other founder is extremely smart. I'm like, and then you're like, well, I trust you too. I implicitly, if that's true, then I should be able to trust your decision on like the rest of your team, so.
Right. Have you ever heard the thing where it's like when you're going to acquire a company or something like that, you want to check the founders, you go to IKEA and you buy like the biggest furniture set and you build it with them and you see how they handle the thing. And it's like, I don't know if it was real or not, but I was like, I mean, that's not a terrible idea. I low-key considered that because I'm like, that'd be a great way to handle anything. I mean, that works for businesses. That works for relationships. Yeah. IKEA is.
I think if you can find a way to be, you kind of want to be like, can we work together? And whatever you can do to resolve that is like super, super useful. And honestly, it's like when you can just like talk to somebody and you have a similar view of the world, usually like you can tell right away. Our CTO was the same thing. I'm like, oh, he's smart. He's aligned. Like he's not going to have weird opinions about what should be. And this is really important, especially from like executive hires. Like you don't hire somebody that thinks what you're doing is wrong and it should change. Like when I was hiring for the CEO role, it's like there was a sales guy and he's like, he just straight up told me we're doing building the business wrong. I'm like, that might be right, but you're definitely not getting hired now. Like it's okay if we're building the business wrong. We chose to do that and you have no idea why. And maybe we have to change it later, but like your job is not to come in and change things. Like that's actually not why we're hiring you, And too many executives make that mistake. Again, this is why hiring executives is not fun. Because it's actually much harder to gauge that kind of thing. Like that was lucky that they were just like forthcoming with like almost like an insulting conversation. But that's not always the case. So
Yeah. And as you said, Ryan, like building furniture at IKEA might not be a tough enough test to see how somebody would respond under pressure. Yeah.
That's why you got to get one of the big ones. The
Yeah,
dressers.
sure. We should build some together next time I'm in Florida. See how that
Yikes.
works out.
Right.
Anyway, so interesting model has been popularized and became sort of a default playbook for building businesses right now in tech. Open source into cloud software as a service. And I was really, really curious to hear your thoughts on that. Do you think that's like a good thing for the industry? Do you feel like it's a good model for the world, etc.?
yeah, I think generally speaking, open source is good. So Sentry is this thing called fair source, and what the TLDR is just like in 2 years, everything we ship is liberal, like permissive open source. It goes Apache or MIT. But for 2 years after we push the code to GitHub, you cannot you cannot compete with us by selling that code that we wrote, which I think is good balance for protection. But I'm a big believer in open source. There's a lot of nuance because open source is not a business or a model or anything like that. It's an attribute of a thing. And so it works or it doesn't work kind of thing. Not all of Sentry's open source. Our billing code, closed source. Nobody needs that. It doesn't even matter. Like maybe you could learn from it. It's kind of a disaster of complexity. So maybe there's value in it being open source, but there's no value in terms of a customer using our product and that being open source. And so that's how we thought about it. But like the reason Sentry is open source is just because we want it to be. Not because it's a business decision or anything. It's just like, I like open source. Again, access to software helps you learn things like that. I think that's really important. You do have to then make decisions around it. And so ours fits flawlessly with our business model. Like the cloud services for Sentry just make sense because the data is not crazy sensitive. So you'll push it to a third party. It's infrastructure. You don't want to run it yourself. It has a natural monetization ability behind it. But that is like, I actually think that's super rare in open source. Like there's a lot of libraries and stuff. It's like, how are you going to monetize that? Not a cloud service, that's for sure. At least not the core thing. It's really complicated. And there's a lot of stuff in history that they couldn't. And a lot of them, what they've done is like open core, which is like I'm not a big fan because usually what happens is you ship like the open source thing, the free thing, and you ship the good thing and it costs an enormous amount of money to use. And what you always need is the good thing. And it's just like, it's not fun. So ours is like, there's only one version. The thing on GitHub is what we run in production. It has all the features. I think asterisk, there might be some weird things, but generally speaking, it's the exact same code, right? But I do think the open source thing is hard. I always tell people this. I'm like, if you can, you should be open source because it gives you a competitive advantage. However, at the same time, it commoditizes the entire TAM, the entire market, meaning you will make less money, but so will everybody else. And Sentry had one mission when we went into this, and it was like, if we don't win, if we don't make money, nobody will. That's still the goal. We will eat the entire industry around us and keep that true. And you can't even compete with us because we've driven it to a commodity. You can't make it even cheaper than Sentry because like we have at scale economics and stuff, and it's like, and I think we actually have a lot of competitors over and over. And I don't think people understand it. It's like, you literally cannot compete with us over a long period of time because we're fully sustainable with this model. And that was true for everybody back in the day. And it worked really, really well, but we don't charge that much money, which means we also can't charge that much money. And that's really important. And so, in a space like ours, I think that's okay because we can get hundreds of thousands of tech companies using Sentry. If you're doing something more specific, you're building like mainframes or something crazy these days, you can't do that because like you're only going to have a handful of customers. And it's like, people don't like paying money for things. Like they will, but like if they don't have to, why would they? And so there's always this balance, I think. But I think it's tricky. And I think it's more, you got to decide what your business is and then like what models will work around it, because usually licensing is also a big complexity in this. And I think a lot of the things that are open source doesn't really matter. Because like if you're not going to run it yourself, like if you're not going to take advantage of the fact that it's open source, like cool, it's public code, but code is not that complicated, especially with AI these days. Code is not like sensitive anymore. Is kind of the way I think about it. And so still valuable, but I don't know. There's a lot of these, like Supabase is a really good example. I think it's all open source. Like who is using the open source thing? Is anybody? I don't even know. Like, why would you so it's like one of those weird things, like kind of cool. Do you? Okay. So somebody does.
So it's nice. Well, I don't do all like the standard I went to the repo and like cloned everything. There's another open source thing called Docploy, which is like a Docker based Vercel alternative that like you can host yourself.
Oh,
And,
Doku. Yeah. Is that the one? Or is it?
Docploy.
Okay, so there's another one called like Doku that was like, I know the guy who wrote it, but yeah, I get you. Continue.
Yeah, it's like the Coolify, Doku, all the open source Vercel alternatives. But anyways, I was looking through like the little marketplace and I saw Supabase and I was like, huh, that's interesting. I thought they were like a company, and I just clicked the one-click install, signed in, and it was basically like the same UI. I think there's like a version where it's like only like you can only access like the web implement or the servers, the backend implementation of it, where it's like a lighter load. But I mean, it worked just fine, and as long as it was easy to set up, like I'm not going to go out of my way to like if I see a company and it's like you could spend an hour and a half messing with this, or you could pay us $8. I'm like, all right, I'll just pay the $8, so that way I know it's managed. I know I'm not going to mess it up. But yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, that's cool. And I do think there's also a class of tech that it's mandatory. It's open source.
Right.
Like think core infrastructure. I am not running a closed source database. Period. Full stop. It's not going to happen. You know, I'm not going to give you control over my own destiny. And that's like the rational way everybody should think about it. And so I think that also plays a part in it. But you really just got to think about like, well, what is the market? How would you commercialize this? What are you doing by open sourcing or not open sourcing the thing?
Yeah.
If you were to start Sentry in 2025, what would you do differently, if anything? Or would you like still launch it as open source?
I think, I would still do the open source part. I don't think I would change much. I might change some of the functionality that I've built over the years. I think I would change the hiring structure. I would definitely make different decisions around the progression of how we built the company and things like that. You learn a lot along the way. Also, times change. Things that worked 10 years ago don't work today. Lots of things have changed, right? I don't know from a product, like, it's interesting because if I look at Sentry, my vision has not changed and we're still executing on my vision. Sometimes we take roundabout ways to get to where I want us to go, but we kind of continually end up there. And that's good. I think some things I wish we would have like, I don't know, it's hard. Here's a really good example. ClickHouse did not exist when I built Sentry. I used Postgres. We still use Postgres, but we also use ClickHouse. ClickHouse would allow me to design it very differently in a way where I'm not supporting a bunch of legacy decisions. So there are a lot of little things like that I make, but I don't think the core of it I would change whatsoever. I think the core of what it does is really, really effective, and we've evolved it along the way too. Like if I could build it basically what it is today or trying to be today, I would. But you don't know these things at the time, or you have to start with smaller ambitions and stuff. Because like Sentry does so many things now. But the error monitoring is like, it's roughly the same as it was 17 years ago when I started the project.
Right.
So like obviously the code changed a lot, but the fundamental like user interface and stuff is not that different. So
yeah, makes a lot of sense. We're approaching the end of the hour, so we're going to try to work towards the wrap up. We have a few questions in the chat. Let me read through them real quick to you. First of all, somebody's thanking you. Sentry's so much better in terms of UX than whatever else they had used previously for error tracking. Splunk, G-Cloud for logs and profiling. I don't envy you, man. Google Cloud, I'm sorry.
They're not. I don't know what it is with Google.
Yeah. Maybe in the same topic. Question about active users. Curious if your audience is mostly businesses or individuals.
It's a good question. It's a lot of both. I couldn't give you the breakdown. What we measure is we're not a business that focuses on can we convert free people to paid people, because the model is a lot of hobbyists use Sentry. That's what we want. We're not trying to charge them. We're not trying to make it a consumer business. Our goal is to make money on companies, right? I can't tell you most. What I can tell you is 70,000 companies pay us, and we have something like 140,000 total. That does include self-hosted, which are not all businesses, but a lot of businesses. But it's a lot of hobbyists, which makes sense.
Like you guys, it's the pipeline too. Yeah, it's like if like, let's say I'm a hobbyist, I use Sentry, and then I go and work at a company, and they're like, "Hey, what do you?" Hey, well, I've been using Sentry. It's great, and then that's how you convert. I think that's a great pipeline because it's
it's awareness
already established. Yeah.
And since we were touching on open source, somebody was asking about the licensing and how you pick the correct license for the type of business, right? For example, Cal.com went AGPL, and what are your thoughts on the decision-making process here?
There are basically two. You either go open source or you don't. Now, you can do a shenanigan license. So AGPL is just a way to make it scared for companies to use it and commercialize it. It's just another tactic. Like copyleft licenses are kind of like that. They don't necessarily protect you, to be fair, but that's why it is what it is. And I think Cal is also open core, to be fair. So not all of their code is open source. I don't know which parts are not open source and which parts are. AGPL being an open source license, but we don't have time to answer that question, is what I would say, because it is actually quite a lot of complexity. You just need a belief system. You need to believe in open source or the things you want and make the things you want work. I wanted everybody to be able to use Sentry. That's my number one goal, is every single person in the world uses Sentry that wants to use Sentry. So they need to be able to like self-host it. That's a requirement of my goal, right? And this is how I enabled the goal, is this license strategy. But I added protection to it because I didn't want to say GitLab to sell Sentry, because they don't deserve to sell Sentry. They didn't build any of it. They don't contribute it. Same thing with other things. And so that's how we think about it. And so you got to really design it around what you're doing. Fair source, which is the thing we did, which has the FSL license, which is the license we built.
Right.
If you are a SaaS business that can look pretty similar to Sentry, it's beautiful if you like all the same things we like. But, you know, again, it depends. I think there's a lot of decisions. And if ping me on, like DM me on Twitter or something, I'm happy to like provide more feedback, because it is pretty nuanced and specific.
Awesome.
Yeah, I texted one of my buddies who used to work at Cal, and if it's completely open source, and he has yet to respond to me. But I'm like 99% sure that it is like completely open source. But with
it might be. I get the sense, because I get in this fight. There's this one VC that's like an open core guy, and I despise him. And I feel like they told me, him and the Cal guy were like, no, Cal's open core, and open core is totally the right way to do business. And I'm like, there's many ways to do business, is kind of my stance. And I prefer to not do open core. So
yeah, makes a lot of sense. All right, we'll try to wrap it up here. One question we always close out with: if you could share one piece of advice with yourself from 10 years ago, from your past version of yourself, what would it be?
And there is a correct answer.
Oh, is there?
Yeah,
there is.
Is it like invest in NVIDIA or Bitcoin or something?
No way! No way!
You got it.
Oh my gosh, dude, you got it.
Have you seen my 911? That was paid for by NVIDIA money. So, anyways, no, but in beyond the money thing, like legitimately, I tell this all the founders, like, just trust your gut. Every fucked up decision I've made, I knew was wrong, and it was a pain in the ass to fix, and I had to fix it no matter what. And you always know. And it's usually like hiring or something stupid. You're like, I don't know if this is going to work. And it doesn't work. I've never seen it work. And it's like, you often don't believe in yourself or something. You're just you've not been through this. So you don't know. People give you bad advice, but like legit, you could avoid so many headaches. If something feels wrong, it's probably wrong. You know, it's
right.
Humans are pretty good that way. So
yeah, that makes sense. All right. Well, we will go ahead and wrap up. And this is your 1 minute to plug everything. So where can folks follow you and find your work and use Sentry? Go ahead.
I mean, you Google David Cramer, I better be number one. But yeah, otherwise Twitter, I'm ZEEG, which is some made up thing from like 20 years ago. I need a better handle. But yeah, I've got a blog where I write about a bunch of random stuff, but there's a lot of like stuff from Sentry's story in there that I think is genuinely useful advice, because I'm not a bullshitter. I will tell you how I feel. And I think generally people appreciate that. So CRA.mr is the blog. You know, Sentry, hopefully you know what it is. Use it if you don't, it's cool. Give us feedback, most importantly. Like literally tell us what you hate. That's like the most useful thing. Negative feedback loops, key in product. And so, but yeah, I don't really got anything to shill. But yeah, listen to Acquired FM. It's fun. Cool stories on there. So
will do. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming on. It's been a great episode. I've learned so much. But yeah, man, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, for sure. This was fun. Thanks for having me, guys.
Of course. All right. And we will see everyone else. See you later.